Houthi rebels control the sector of telecommunications and make use of the revenues to support war fronts. The war worsens Yemeni collapsed economy and aggravates people's suffering. Joint forces deter Houthis' attack in Hodeidah and inflict heavy losses among them. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English news with me, Rana Swalem. Communication sector in Yemen is a weapon in the hands of the Houthi rebels. The government, however, does nothing to protect people's privacy from this Houthi bugging. The following report has more details.
Over the past 4 years of the Houthi coup against power in Yemen, the telecommunication sector and the mobile phone companies and their affiliates turned into major financial resources to finance the militias' war against the Yemenis. The telecommunication sector constitutes one of the most important financial resources for the Houthi militia to continue its war against the Yemeni people, in addition to using it to spy on calls, messages, and communication of subscribers on the social media. The militia held in achieving this by controlling the public telecommunications corporation, Yemen Mobile, Tele Yemen, and Yemen Net, and tightening its grip on private telecommunication companies, which enabled it to collect tax resources from the public and private telecommunication sectors, which are about 80 billion riyals annually. Private sources in the capital Sana'a revealed that the coup militia has recently imposed huge royalties on the owners of the wireless internet network spread across the capital. The sources confirmed that the militia's affiliated elements and employees in the culture offices in the districts of the capital secretariat carried out arbitrary field campaigns, targeting the owners of wireless networks, forcing them under the force of arms to pay illegal royalties, under the pretext of creating new licenses from the culture offices. In turn, the owners of the wireless networks in the capital Sana'a said that they were surprised by the intense Houthi campaigns in the past 2 weeks to force them to pay illegal sums of money in crude and racist provocative ways. They pointed out that whoever did not commit to paying royalties to the militias, a torrent of accusations would be brought against him, and he would be forced to pay double amounts as a discipline from the group for those who did not comply. The militia's violations, according to economists, are the culmination of a series of unjustified violations that the group has carried out since its coup against power, targeting capital and the local private sector in the first place. Economists confirmed that the pre-planned targets of the coup are still continuing, and in the coming days it will affect the remaining capital and private companies related to the communications and information technology sector in Sana'a and the rest of its areas of control. They pointed out that the private telecommunications sector ranked first with regard to targeting militias in their areas of control. According to a local report, the number of internet users in Yemen reached 6.911 million, representing 24.6% of the total population, which is the lowest percentage in the Middle East. The report, prepared by the Center for Studies in Economic Media, indicated that most of the population does not use the internet, especially in rural areas where there is no internet. The speed of the internet is one of the most important obstacles to accessing it in Yemen, as it is the lowest in the region and the most expensive compared to the region and the world. Communications are still an effective weapon in the hands of the militia, and the government is unable to restore service, protect the privacy of citizens, and protect government forces from intrusion.
City of Mecca witnessed a massive demonstrations to denounce targeting of the Mecca port with Houthi missiles and drones. The demonstrators issued a statement calling on the international community and the United Nations to stop Houthi war crimes and hold them accountable for such atrocities. The statement considered the attacks on the port as being an attack against every home, family, and individual in Mecca. Further, demonstrators called on the whole world to assume its responsibilities and take urgent action against Houthi crimes, which are considered a violation of all international laws and norms. The economic situation in Yemen is witnessing its worst days in nearly 7 years since the start of the war. The continuing collapse of the currency, inflation, and the absence of basic services put more pressure on people. More on this story is within this report.
The economic situation in Yemen is heading downward. The last episode of this deterioration is a new fall of the Yemeni rial against the United States dollar. The rial hovered around 1,086 against the dollar to register a record low. The fall obliged regulators to stop transactions for foreign exchange until further note. What is happening to the Yemeni local currency goes back to the situation in the whole country. The main factors are the ongoing war, the disruption of services, the need for humanitarian aid, and the absence of governance and responsibility. Monetary institutions in Yemen are divided between the government in Aden and the Houthi de facto control. There is price differentiation in local currency. Adding to that, Houthi restriction on the new issued currency that was circulated by the government did a lot of harm to the economy. The more troubling is the manipulation played by the private foreign exchange companies and the manipulations in the rate of dollar in the black market. The United Nations warned many times that the Yemeni economy is facing a troubling days ahead, especially in the government-controlled areas. The organization said that the diving rial would have catastrophic consequences on the economy and the commercial activity in the country. As a result, the life of Yemenis will be greatly affected, knowing that there are millions on the brink of poverty, hunger, and death. There are also many who struggle hard to cope, and those state servants who have not been paid for years. The humanitarian situation will worsen because of the economic situation that is subject to Houthi tapping and sapping of international aid that comes to the country through the Hodeidah port. For all of that, people went out to the streets. They are fed up with deteriorating life conditions. They went out to vent their anger against the government negligence in providing them with basic services. Protests flared in Hadramaut, specifically in Al-Mukalla city. The angry protesters set fire in tires and closed main roads in the city. Their first demand is to return back electric power in addition to other basic services. In the governorate of Abiyan and other parts of Yemen, there were protests too. The same demands were voiced, and the same accusation to the same people were expressed. Looking into that, the government must act swiftly to return back life into its normality, and the international community should press harder on Houthis to end their unjust war.
The Houthi militia continues to impose new additional royalties under the name of cleaning fees. Several commercial sources said that the Houthi militia asked shop owners in the areas under their control to pay 1,000 riyals on the daily basis. The sources confirmed that the militia justified this by what they called cleaning fees. According to economic observers, the Houthi militia earns tens of millions of riyals daily out of the newly imposed fees. In Al-Tuhaita, 6 Houthi militants were killed and others wounded in clashes with the joint forces. A military source confirmed that Houthi rebels tried to penetrate Al-Faza front in Al-Tuhaita, where they were confronted with heavy resistance from the joint forces, and the remaining Houthis were forced to flee.
In a new setback to the Houthi rebels in different fronts in Yemen, the joint forces inflicted heavy losses on the rebels in Al-Hodeidah to the west of the country. The military media of the joint forces announced that in the past few hours the joint forces tracked and spotted members of the Houthi rebels to the west of Al-Hais city. The media said Houthi mobilized new deployment to the area close to the contact lines with the joint forces. After spotting and tracking the Houthi movements in Hais, the joint forces clashed with the rebels and inflicted casualties among them. Other remaining Houthis managed to flee. The joint forces military media added that the clashes destroyed a Houthi artillery position and one of their P-10 vehicles. In Hodeidah, Houthi militia tried to penetrate the position of the joint forces that managed to control the main smuggler road south of Tuhaita. The military media said the Houthi attempt was deterred by the vigilance of the joint forces there. The rebels tried to penetrate the lines of the joint forces in Al-Faza area in Tuhaita. The penetration failed, and the rebels left behind a number of them killed and wounded. The same setback occurred to the militia in their attempt to infiltrate into joint forces position in the Sikitsin area to the east of Hodeidah. The Houthis were confronted with fierce clashes with different types of medium and heavy weapons, causing casualties among them. Houthis lost lives too in positions between the governorates of Al-Bayda and Abyan to the center south of Yemen. The resistance forces fired mortars on the Houthi gatherings, followed by a shootout between the two sides. In Ma'rib, the strategic city, Houthis are trying in the past few days to secure again through pushing their fighter to the contact lines. The rebels try to penetrate the lines of the government forces that are backed by the tribes. A military source confirmed that the latter battled a number of Houthi penetration al-Qassara to the west of Ma'rib and caused heavy losses among them.
The National Resistance Cell for Humanitarian Action distributed 250 food baskets to families in Hais. Local people showed their appreciation to the leadership of the National Resistance for quickly supplying them with food which they were previously deprived of. They also valued the role played by the joint forces in terms of protecting them from the Houthi rebels. Tribal sources in Sana'a confirmed that the Houthi militia's underestimation of the demands of the people could generate a popular uprising against them. The sources explained that the terrorist Houthi practices of killing Yemeni people have become a deliberate policy meant to intimidate people and ensure easy control on them. The sources stated that the leaders and supervisors of the Houthi militia give direct instructions to liquidate anyone who stands in the way of the militia in their domination of people and tries to defend their rights from the Houthi gang that escalated the looting of the land and property. Coming next. Houthi deadly mines continue to claim innocent civilians' lives.
ثالثتي على منطقة الروضة استهدف الأطفال الأبرياء اللي يلعبوا في الشارع يدعي للسلام يقولوا للسلام يقتل أطفالنا يقتل أطفالنا الأبرياء.
أنا قلت افتجعت ولا قلنا يقع واحد صاروخ ثاني طلعت البيت حقنا عشان ألعب أنا وأصحابي والصاروخ الطرح.
Welcome back. Houthi deadly mines continue to sweep lives of innocent civilians nationwide. Despite the joint efforts done by local, regional and international organizations to demine these minefields, lots of it remain hidden and unmapped. This report sheds light on this story.
The conflict in Yemen has been described as the world's worst humanitarian crisis. Since the Houthi rebels has taken over Yemen's capital Sana'a in 2014, there has been a civil war affecting the most vulnerable groups. One of the most dangerous factors impacting not only those involved in the civil war, but civilians is the fact that Yemen is covered in landmines and explosives. Since January 2018, over 140 civilians, including 19 children, have lost their lives to landmines in Hodeidah and Taiz governorates alone. Experts believe the death tolls of landmines fall somewhere above 9,000. Furthermore, since the impact of landmines is very difficult to track, the numbers are expected to be much higher than documented. Osama Al-Qusaybi, the program manager of the Saudi-funded Massam demining project, commented that it's not being used as a defensive or offensive mechanism. It's being used to terrorize the local population across Yemen. The mines impact the outreach of the aid and make it impossible for families to return to their homes. Priyanka Mothaparty, acting emergencies director at Human Rights Watch, stated that Houthi-laid landmines have not only killed a numerous of civilians, but they have prevented vulnerable Yemenis from harvesting crops and drawing clean water desperately needed for survival. The landmines are usually placed in open fields, roads, farmlands, wells, and even abandoned schools. In addition, they are hidden in tree trunks and fake rocks to make them more difficult to detect. There have also been reports of the militia rebels converting these anti-tank mines into anti-personnel mines. Landmines that would usually require the pressure of 220 pounds to explode have been alerted to only require 22 pounds. This means even the weight of a small child passing over the landmine would detonate. Yemen is impacted severely by landmines placed during the previous conflicts. This landmine problem is becoming worse due to the Houthi rebels placing their mines randomly and unmapped. Massam project cleared around 1,200 landmines during the past week of September. Up to 3 million square meters have been cleared and around 66,000 undetained landmines have been removed. But despite their efforts, the Yemeni government stated that it would take multiple decades to remove all mines from Yemen. You cannot rebuild Yemen without addressing the mine issue. Landmines will impact Yemen's future for decades to come.
The hard economic situation in Yemen has pushed many people to the brink of poverty. Many people complain from high prices and cannot afford buying basic commodities. The following report has more on this story.
Rising prices continue to make food increasingly unaffordable for many households in Yemen. People are suffering from rising food prices, particularly in Houthi-controlled areas, which makes it hard for citizens in Yemen to have average access to income. The Yemeni economy continues to be impacted by shortages of foreign currency due to protracted conflict and political instability. The local currency has continued to drop in Houthi-controlled areas, despite regulations issued by the Central Bank of Yemen in Aden, with the parallel market exchange rate reaching a new record. The Yemeni currency reached its lowest level ever against the dollar in the exchange market transactions. The decline also came despite the strict measures and restrictions imposed by the Central Bank of Yemen on the foreign exchange sector to put an end to the continuous sharp deterioration in the deteriorating local currency. However, these efforts and measures did not positively bear the improvement of the value of the local currency against foreign currencies, according to observers and economists. The prices are increasing on a daily basis, and the Yemeni society keeps suffering from all difficulties in different fields. How can a normal human being live when they cannot afford the normal life necessities?
The National Committee Against Coronavirus announced 56 new cases of the COVID-19 in 7 governorates. Committee officials said on Twitter that 17 cases were recorded in Hadramaut, 15 in Ma'rib, 11 in Aden, 6 in Al-Bayda, 3 in Taiz, 3 in Shabwa, and 1 in Al-Dali'. Also 15 deaths were recorded plus 35 recovered cases. Here's a reminder of the main headlines. Houthi rebels control the sector of telecommunications and make use of its revenues to support war fronts. The war worsens Yemeni collapsed economy and aggravates people's suffering. Joint forces deter Houthi attacks in Hodeidah and inflict heavy losses among them. Thank you for watching. See you soon.